Oh, hello. I didn't hear you come in. I'm just here working very hard on the next Starcraft 2 video, which I'm sure you can imagine is a very tasking and complicated process. Well, it is, okay? The Starcraft 2 editor is a tool as powerful as it is weird and frustrating. It's the same thing they used to make the game back all those years ago, and while it's perfectly reasonable for anyone to pick up and learn, there are definitely still some aspects that make it clear it was intended primarily for people who watched it being built, or at least had guidance from the people who did. Now, I've only been tinkering with it for about a year now, and not even on any of the gameplay affecting things. I've just been making my little movies, trying to see how far I can push this thing as the animation platform it was never supposed to be. There's still a whole side of this editor I'm not paying any attention to, but if you're familiar with any of the games in the StarCraft 2 arcade, I'm sure that you have a decent idea of what sorts of things you can make this game do. It can be tower defense, first-person shooting, prop hunt, even a card game, and so much more. But me? I decided to make it a toy box, making units walk around, talk to each other, and mash into each other in deadly combat. And all throughout my time making the History of the Terran, Zerg, and Protoss videos, as well as 2 original creations, Hostile Ground and Recovery and Cleanup, I've learned a lot. Some weird things, some funny things, some frustrating things, and I want to take a little time to share some of it. This isn't a tutorial video. While I might have to briefly explain something about the editor to make a point, I'm not going to make you sit through complicated workflows or too much technical jargon. Let's start with something simple, just so you know you can believe me. Number 1. It's no secret that StarCraft 2 has unit skins that you can either unlock or buy, primarily buy. But did you know that there's a really weird and incredibly minor bug with one of them? The classic skin for the Terran Marine has an issue where the player or faction icon on its shoulder pads is mirrored, leading to one shoulder displaying incorrectly. On other Marine skins where you can see this icon on either shoulder pad, like the default one, the icon is just duplicated, showing in the correct orientation on either one, but someone screwed up a little with the classic skin. Now, this is a total non-issue. I don't know if anyone else working with the editor has ever noticed this tiny little bug, but I can almost guarantee you that anyone who just plays the game has never seen this. You can barely tell these guys have icons on their shoulders to begin with, and when you have real things to focus on, no way. But still, I hope this gets fixed in the next patch. It basically makes the skin unplayable. So see, that wasn't too bad. Perfectly understandable. But let's move on to something just slightly more complicated. Number 2 is something annoying. Something that doesn't make a ton of sense to me and has caused a little bit of frustration as I've worked. In the editor, you can freely set the X, Y, and Z scale of any object, be it a unit or a doodad. Oh, a doodad is what the editor calls anything that isn't a unit or a texture, just a piece of map decoration that you can't target. You can set the scale of these to pretty hilarious extremes, or just gently nudge something to be slightly bigger or smaller. There's also a neat feature where you can set a range for the scale, a minimum and maximum, which the game will choose from randomly as you place them. This allows, say, a collection of trees to have some interesting size variation to look a little more natural, or the same for a crowd of civilians. The weird, annoying thing comes from the fact that if you open up the properties of a specific doodad by double-clicking on it, you can further set its individual scale, totally disconnected from the range you set previously. You cannot do the same for units. For some reason, this feature only exists for doodads. So while you can have a varied, natural-looking forest surrounding one really big tree, you can't have a crowd of civilians all worshipping a giant one. You know, in case that's a thing you wanted. Speaking of units and doodads, number 3 is a little more about them. There are some really interesting models sitting around the dusty corners of the editor. StarCraft 2 has literally thousands of different objects you can pick from to put on a map, but some of them are very obviously purpose-built for a specific use. For instance, the Set category in the unit browser. Now, I'm not entirely sure why they're units and not doodads, or at least why there aren't 2 kinds, because most models you'll find here are just random stuff that you wouldn't really consider a unit. These are the higher quality models that make up the, well, sets of places like the Hyperion in Wings of Liberty, or anything you might see in one of the in-engine cutscenes. Some are individual objects, some are a bunch. They don't tend to have the same kind of flexibility that regular doodads do, since they're generally only supposed to be seen from a specific angle, so their applicability in maps for playing a game on is sorta limited. But if you're, say, a crazy person who decided to make animations with this tool, then there might be something in there for you. And actually, going back a little bit to the first point, check out Jim Raynor. For some reason, using the player icon and having it backwards. No clue. And while we're on the topic of units, number 4 brings us to what is probably the most complicated one, changing a unit's color. No, not their team color, that's just done here with the setting the team colors and making sure they're on that team. That's easy. What if you want a unit to be green? Like, really green, incredibly obviously green. It's possible, obviously, you're looking at it, but how? Well, much like how you can't just double-click to open up a specific unit's properties and set their independent scale, there's nothing you can do with their tint, either. Not in the quick menu, and not anywhere in the model or unit tab of the data editor. So, where? Enter the actor editor, one of the deepest levels of control you can exert over anything in this game. A unit is made up of various actors, and they control basically every single thing about them, especially visuals. If you know your way around this thing, you can make it do some incredibly powerful stuff. I don't. I'm scared of this place, just look at all these weird variables. But I have used it. In History of the Protoss, I wanted to remove the psionic afterimage the High Templars have, and that's an actor that does stuff while they move. There's a weird thing where if you set a unit that isn't a Marine to use the Marine's model, they'll always have the combat shield, so I had to make it so that they couldn't get that upgrade. And I was going to show you what that looked like inside the editor, but actually while I was making this video I couldn't replicate the process, so, you know, that's cool. And hey, while we're at it, this is also a scrapped point that I thought I was going to be able to make, but on the other map I was working on, when I set the Marine's attack range to over 100, its arms started doing this. But again, I couldn't replicate that, although I did somehow accidentally turn off all of the muzzle flashes. I don't know what happened, I swear I didn't do anything. They're just gone. But hey, back to the actor editor, which is in fact where you control a unit's tint. Not in any sane way, of course, try and follow this. You have to set an event actor that triggers as the unit is created by the game that then recolors it. And I'm not a programmer. I don't know why it has to be done like this, and really it's not a terribly complex process, just obtuse. The absolute weirdest thing about it is that they made it this difficult on purpose. There was a time where you could just set a unit's red, green, and blue tint, and that time was Warcraft 3. It's super easy there. You literally just open up the data editor, pick that unit, scroll down a bit, set the colors. Sure, you need to know your RGB values. I don't think there's a color picker hiding anywhere, but still, this used to be so simple to the point where my incredibly limited experience with the Warcraft 3 editor back in 2000 whatever was enough for me to remember how easy it was. So why did they change it? Then again, maybe they were right to seal this power away from all but the most dedicated eyes. I mean, Speaking of Warcraft 3, number 5 is all about it. It's pretty well known that at some point in the past, Blizzard ported all of the Warcraft 3 assets into Starcraft 2. You can find everything, from the named heroes down to the flowers. But mixed in with them is a bit of a weird bonus. A curated list of Warcraft 3 reforged models exists inside Starcraft 2, just not anywhere close to the same amount as the original ones. You can find them pretty easily by searching for the prefix of War3HD in the model browser, so it's not like they're hidden or anything. Now, I've only done a tiny bit of looking into this, and maybe I should have done more to stop myself from looking dumb if this is already confirmed or something, but the reforged models that are available seem to paint an interesting picture. You've got all the heroes, a selection of random enemies and critters, defensive towers, some scenery, and key buildings like the Altar of Kings and Storms, a marketplace, and a tavern. Was there an official Dota remake planned? Like, maybe to coincide with Reforged release? As far as I understand it, the scope of Reforged kept shrinking and shrinking until it turned out, well, the way it did, but I don't think it's unreasonable to speculate that at one point, someone at Blizzard wanted to celebrate the release by putting a Dota remake on the Starcraft 2 arcade. Whether there were legal considerations with Valve's actual Dota 2, or if it was just another casualty of so many resources being pulled off the main project, or maybe it just wasn't ever a thing at all, I don't know. Like I said, I'm just speculating. But the fact is that a very specific set of high-quality Warcraft 3 Reforged models exists in Starcraft 2 that just happen to be the ones necessary for someone, if they so desired, to remake what was undeniably the most popular mod of Warcraft 3 and one of the most popular of all time. And lastly, number 6. By far the weirdest thing I have found in the entire StarCraft 2 editor. Alright, so, every model in StarCraft 2 is a model you can find and place on the map. We previously saw it with the set units, and it doesn't stop there. You know what's a model? Unit portraits. You might have thought they were just video files, right, or some other kind of animation? No, they're actually models that the game loads and places in the UI. You can change that asset just like anything else. But this also means that you can change something else's model to be one of these unit portraits. Why would you want that? I used a couple for some dramatic close-ups in the history of the Protoss, but generally they're just kind of fun to look at. And incidentally, History of the Protoss is how I learned about this one. So you can see that you've just got these disembodied heads floating around, and they're positioned in front of their background. If you've ever wondered what's behind a unit's portrait, well, this is how you can learn. In a lot of cases, it seems to be either snippets of concept art or more abstract stuff, maybe just part of a wall texture. It doesn't matter, you can barely see the backgrounds in-game, and they're not even the focus, they're just a bit of set dressing. But, in a twist of utterly cosmic proportions, I noticed something about the background for the High Templar. This right here, this is a screenshot of Unreal Tournament 2004. Now, Unreal Tournament 2004 is basically my favorite game of all time. I've made maps for it, I've written articles about it, I've spent probably hundreds of hours in its editor. I recognized this immediately, and I admit I kind of freaked out a little bit. Both StarCraft and Unreal Tournament have been huge parts of my life since I was a kid. They came out around the same time, 98 and 99 respectively. I played them both a lot, and probably too much, and I still cared deeply about both series, which this video and my others might make obvious. So this weird confluence seems almost tailor-made for me. And before we go further, if somehow you think this sounds familiar, I did make a post on the StarCraft subreddit about this when I figured it out a couple months ago, so if you've seen that post, that was me. I'm not stealing anyone else's discovery here. But as this graphic I made back then shows, these are very obviously just assets from UT 2004. And yeah, the Space Egyptian theme fits the Protoss perfectly. I don't blame whoever did this for snapping a quick screenshot and calling it a day. But it gets weirder, because this background image isn't actually from any of the official maps. That's why I had to make the collage instead of just taking the same screenshot. This is from a custom map, and I'm willing to bet it was the artist's custom map. So, if you know, or especially if you are an artist who worked on StarCraft 2 back in the day, could you please talk to me about this? Was this just a fun Easter egg? Was it opportunity? Working on a custom map and needing something thematic for the portrait, and hey, this was on your mind, so has anyone else ever noticed? When I first found this around the start of the year, I looked around to see if anyone else had ever posted about it, and I didn't find anything. Am I the first non-Blizzard person to ever discover this weird, obscure thing hidden behind a High Templar's giant noggin? I kinda hope so. It's a fun claim to fame, as incredibly obscure as it may be. And like I said, this is easily the weirdest thing I have found in the editor. I don't think I will ever top something like this. So that's been this little look into the weird corners of the Starcraft 2 editor. I don't know if I've successfully taught anybody anything. That wasn't really my point. I just wanted to share some of this stuff. I hope that you found it entertaining, and certainly thanks for checking this weird video out. I'm gonna keep working in the editor for the foreseeable future, so I might find some weirder stuff while I do. I have already found one thing, at least. Till then, expect the next video to be something a little original, a little official. Call it a hybrid of the two. Bye.